Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We have lots to discuss today. Not exactly great news from the football front in Buffalo.
Depends how you look at it, Mike.
Well, I mean, if you're going to be a jerk, like somebody who posted a picture of Niagara Falls in the DM.
Are you sure that was me?
Yes, I'm sure. Unless your wife or somebody hijacked your Twitter feed. I was like, I'm not
a fan of Niagara Falls. That's all.
I'm not even giving this the honor of a mention or a response back. I waited until now.
And it's the big losers over the weekend. And you almost never say this about the National Football League, but I think they were. Like, the games were not compelling.
No.
I expected that Bengals game. I was so looking forward to it.
We thought the same thing. I thought that too.
I kind of liked both teams. I didn't really have, a pony in the show there, but I kind of felt, either team, but they could simply not, they being the Bills, could not stop the Bengals.
No, the Bengals outcoached them, outplayed them on both sides of the ball, dominated the line of scrimmage, even with a second string offensive line. It was really bad.
I don't know that they outcoached them. I just thought they out-executed.
Yeah, I don't know if they outcoached them.
They just, the Bengals they just couldn't, it seems like they got 7 yards on every play or more.
And the reason I said they outcoached them is because Leslie Frazier, the defensive coordinator of the Bills, has played nickel all year. And when the Bengals come in and they're going to run the ball.
Yeah, they definitely weren't set up to stop the run.
They only started stopping the Bengals after they went to man, which is after the first quarter, and they were already down 14-0. Let me just say this. I know it's not, okay. We know though, and Russ, I will do the your pre-show.
Yeah,
I know, but okay. Damar Hamlin. It's a great story that he recovered. It's a great story that obviously, but since we've been beaten over the head with here's Damar Hamlin's family in the corporate box at Highmark Stadium. And there's Damar Hamlin with the heart sign. And Damar Hamlin went down to the locker. Okay, I don't need a Damar Hamlin update, and I don't think anybody does. I mean, at a certain point, human interest, it departs and just overkill enters. They beat it into the ground, Kev. There's a certain thing where you can beat a story into the ground, and I think that the networks and even locally they did it. It was just too much.
I don't know. This is just one of those things you and I are going to completely disagree on. When a guy really gets off the turf like he did and was able to, weeks later walk around, that's an amazing story, and people can't get enough of it. It's, I don't know. I understand your perspective, but I just don't agree with it.
Yeah, I know. It's not like me being sick of the Whopper commercial, the Burger King commercial, the Verizon commercial. It's just, that
would really make you a bad person.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Russ, you go with your pre-show. Go ahead.
No, the one thing I had been noticing for the last couple of weeks is that with the Hall of Fame voting, and Mike and I just wrote about it for Full Press, that there have been enough rule changes since COVID, and now the new rule changes, that it's almost telling me that it's going to be very hard for I'm looking at my phone and I see that my screen has popped out. That's not good. It's just like it's
continue.
Yeah, anyhow, that's a continuing story, folks. But anyhow, my issue is with all of these changes, like the pitch clock, that's going to change things for 15 seconds a pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's pitchers like Nick Pivetta have said that's really going to foul with his rhythm. And you've got the bases are going to be bigger. So now I'm assuming guys will be stealing bases again. I'm assuming guys Oh, they're going to steal bases.
They're going to steal bases. I don't think 2-8 is
going to be up a lot.
Difference between all of a sudden everybody becoming Vince Coleman. But
well, I'll tell you what the difference is. Nobody leg slides anymore into second.
Yeah.
And now that you have an extra half inch or whatever it is to grab onto, that makes it that much harder for the fielder to get them. So I think some guys will get 10 more stolen bases than they used to. I think with pitchers, some will be fouled up for part of the season because they're only going to get the spring to work on it.
They'll get used to it.
Some have been living off the fact that they could control the pace of the game. And then, between the ghost runner and everything else, I think now for the next group in like 20 years, you're going to have to look at a lot of these different things because they're not getting asterisked. And if you're like a 25-year-old writer in the year 2035, a lot has changed from the past 15 years. A lot.
Yeah, although,
I already know your answer, Kev.
Yeah.
But it's okay. I think you're wrong.
Let him talk.
Well, I mean, I do think that it is going to change the game, but we've had these changes. I've lived through, as dramatic changes as you could possibly have. Like I remember specifically the human outcry over the 3-point shot in basketball. I mean, did it end up changing the game? Sure, it did. But now it's just mainstream. It's just so much a part of the game that it's hard to believe that at one point it didn't exist. And when they lowered the mound in baseball, I remember reading long stories in the sporting news, people just crying that it was going to ruin baseball and it wasn't going to be, it was going to be awful. And did it have an impact? Yeah, of course it did. But we've gotten through it, and I've read the same stories about some of the things that I think all of us don't like, the loss of the complete game, and the softball swings that we now have, the launch angles, and it's really changed the game. All of a sudden, 270 is the former 300. Like, we don't like that, but that's just kind of the evolution of the game, and it's going to change again, and there are going to be even more significant rules. So, although I agree with you that it will change, and I loved, I saw Freeman talking about what eventually robotics is going to do for the game, where he talked about it's all going to be on where the pitch is now called, because robots will call it at the beginning of the plate where it should be called, but we all know that it's actually called where the catcher catches it. We know that because analytics have shown us that that's true. And, instead of just complaining about it, he says, we're all going to have to adjust. Right. That's all he said about it. And I thought, well, that's impressive. But, the idea is that good hitters will sort it out, and, the managers will sort it out. We're seeing that in hockey with 3-on-3 overtime. It was so exciting, and now it's overcoached, and everything has changed.
It's more pronounced than the NHL, and I think like the robot umpires for a while are going to be exploited by pitchers with late breaking pitches and stuff. I think there's going to be a way around it until.
I think everybody in the league is predicting that, but they'll adjust. Just like athletes are. The reason they've gotten here is because they have the ability to do things that we can't do. So,
sure.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there are examples of rules that we changed that we realized were a disaster and we've gone back. But, right now I can't come up with one. But, who knows? Maybe.
Well, maybe the tag up the offsides, and I'm very in favor of the tag up offside like we have right now. And the one that we had before, I thought was detrimental to the game because we had so many offsides that were called that slowed the game down. And now if you tag up, it keeps going, and I think that's beneficial.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I actually had talked to someone. It was actually just today about the idea. We got into a discussion of whether the offside rule in hockey and replay, if the guy's not part of the play, whether it should be counted, kind of like soccer. If you're in soccer, if you're not in the play and you're in an offside position, it doesn't matter.
Like somebody getting off the ice, going to the bench.
Yeah, or just there are 3 people breaking in the zone, and 2 of them combine on a goal, and the third guy who was actually offside never got into the play. Well, then it's a good goal. So
I'll just say one thing about because when Russ and I wrote these articles about the Hall of Fame, and we're looking at a couple pitchers, and the reality is now with the 100 pitch count with starters and how we've seen the number of wins decline. I mean, you can have a bunch of middle relievers winning 11, 12 games in the current with the way things are going right now. So starting pitchers, a guy who's going to have like a 160 and 80 record might be a Hall of Famer 10, 15 years now. And I think unless they change the rules in terms of not a win for 5 innings, a win for 4 innings or something like that.
Yeah. Well, one thing that, and I don't know, I've never been obviously on a baseball selection committee, and baseball's done it differently. I've been on committees, and I've been on small committees that vote. I was on the Hockey Hall of Fame again. I did a stint on that. You rotate out of that, and I rotated out. I also have been on the U.S. Hockey, and in both those cases, one of the things we always stress, even though fans always talk about it, they want to do comparisons, but we always stress it can't be about the numbers because numbers of each era are different. You got to look beyond the numbers. And I think when you're on a good committee, and I've been on good committees, they do look beyond that. Like the stuff you're talking about really doesn't enter into it. They talk more about the impact the guy had on the game. So, the idea of, okay, so-and-so is the has the highest batting average of any second baseman still left. Like that's not what people talk about. They just talk about the impact he had in terms of, did he lead his league in categories and all that kind of stuff. So I hope that we can get back to that because you're absolutely right. I mean, how in the world do you judge, the fact that, none of these pitchers now go beyond 100 pitches, 5 or 6, and compare them to guys that, weren't going to be nearly as good. I mean, so there's people who've gotten in the Hall of Fame who, in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning, those were their worst 3 innings because they were expected to go 9 innings. So,
all right, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, January 23rd, 2023.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, we'll start with the news of the weekend, which was the Saga in Vancouver. The eventual, and boy, this was dragged out, the firing of Bruce Boudreau and the worst kept secret in the world of Rick Tocchet replacing Boudreau. Now, I saw the one thing here, Kevin, if this is the reason for it being dragged out, this is terrible. Sean Shapiro reported that Tocchet had a 4-week he had a 4-week warning for TNT that he had to provide them to be able to get out of his contract with TNT.
Yeah, he had to give them a 4-week notice was the report. Yeah. But the thing about it that really bugs me about that is, did anybody just go to them and say, did they really want to prevent him from going to a coaching job? Like, yeah, sometimes those notices do exist, but they get altered all the time.
Right.
Usually if somebody's leaving you, you don't want them around. You want them to clear out. So I'm really bothered by that, number one, that, nobody think. But secondly, even if that was the case, like that, there's no excuse for the way they treated Bruce Boudreau. I mean, who's a guy that's, respected around. Everybody likes playing for him. He's just a good guy. And like his speech, that teary speech that he made after that game really just sums up what a kind of person he is. Really it was to him is about being part of the game. And to treat a guy like that the way they did, and it's reprehensible.
That's what I was saying on other shows, Kev. The Canucks will be lucky to find a coach that cares about the game and players and everything else as much as he did in as bad a situation as it was. It's easy to coach when things are great.
And the funny thing, Russ, the funny thing is, the best thing would be is if TNT hired Bruce Boudreau to replace Rick Tocchet. I would absolutely.
Yeah, he's not doing that. He's going back to Hershey. He said he gets these stints on NHL radio and he's happy. But the point is, and he's got money now to sit around with too. But the point is, this guy cared that much.
Yeah.
And his team there was all these distractions. The GM had created a little bit of chaos. Rutherford, not Alvin, and the owners have been creating chaos for years, and yet that's how much he cared, and that's how much the fans cared. It's a tough job now for Rick Tocchet to walk into. It's a lot harder than it would have been for when Bruce Boudreau took over.
Well, let's sort of go deeper here, because Boudreau was not the hire of Rutherford and Alvin. He was the hire of Jim Benning, who was let go last year. They bring in the new staff. They bring in Rutherford. And Rutherford and Boudreau apparently go back a long ways. They were both members of the Leafs back in like the late 70s and 80s. And Rutherford was in Detroit for a long time. Then I think he went to LA and he was in Toronto as a goaltender. But even back then, Jeff Merrick was talking about it today. They were like camp counselors at the Orr Walton camp in Aurelia back in like the early 70s. So they go back a ways and they're friendly. But I mean, that from the top, Kev, this was handled really badly in terms of Rutherford making public comments, sort of undercutting the credibility and undercutting the support for Boudreau. Almost like, he knew that he was gone, so he could basically say anything. And I think it was handled terribly by Rutherford, who had a good reputation up until this.
Yeah, I mean, I would have said he was, if you listed the 32 general managers in the order that somebody would treat someone badly, like Rutherford is not going to be at the top of that list.
Right.
He's always been a kind of a classy guy, so it was really kind of surprising, which, especially given all the details you just provided and how far they go back. But even beyond that, even if he just met him for the first time when he got there, I mean, he's got to have known Bruce Boudreau, the way he handles things. And, I've mentioned this before, but what he's known as is, players have told me he knows everything about all of his players' families. And even on the darkest of days in relationships with his players, he's always got something positive to say, even when he's in the middle of telling them, they've made mistakes. And, for that reason, he deserves to kind of go out with some dignity. And you certainly don't do it as publicly as Rutherford did. And it leads me to wonder whether or not there was some extenuating factors here. Was there ownership intervention here? Was there some other issue that we're not aware of?
Go to the interim. So the worst part of this whole thing, Kev, the worst part was when at one point, I think maybe it was on Saturday, where Boudreau goes, "Look, I'm not an idiot. I know what's going on here." Right. And that's what made me think they should have gone to an interim. And that's where it was mishandled the worst.
They had Mike Yeo there, Russ. He's the living interim. They could have gone to him. I mean, once the news broke that he was going to be fired, or that it seemed to be certain he was going to be fired, and that they were going to hire Tocchet, what they should have done is fire Boudreau, put him out of his misery, because the last couple of weeks was just simply misery. It was a terrible optic. Put Yeo in as interim, and then once, if it was the 4-week notice with Tocchet, then make Tocchet the coach at that point. Don't string this along. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Russ, you were right. This is a bad optic for the Canucks organization, and the fish rots from the head on down. Their ownership, I believe this was I know that Tocchet was associated with Alvin and Rutherford going back to the Penguins. They hired Gonchar as well. There's a Penguin connection there. But the move to fire a coach had to come from ownership level. And this ownership group has been dysfunctional for almost every moment that they've owned this team. And I don't think there's any reason for Vancouver fans to feel comfortable that that it's going to change anytime soon. So, I don't know. I don't know where things go. All I know is, like, right now, Kev, now the coaching situation is, now you've got Tocchet in there, but now you got to see how Tocchet adjusts to all these players. And you have 5 weeks until the trade deadline. They're going to be doing major surgery on this roster within the next 5 weeks. Is 5 weeks enough to find out whether Rick Tocchet can reach Bo Horvat or reach?
Well, there's really no way to go except up. I mean, they're 2-8 in their last 10. They've really disappointed the fan base with their performance this season. They have a lot of talented players, but they don't all seem to fit in the financial picture. So they're going to have to make some decisions. There's a lot of pressure, I think, on management there with Rutherford and Alvin to make the right decisions. And, it's complicated. Like, I talking to someone about this within the hockey community, pointed out, he's got multiple options, but none of them are all that attractive. And, is he going to lose Horvat? Can he save Horvat, but then, trade away Besser? Is there some other option here that they can come up with? And there's some complications to it all. So it is going to be, maybe JT Miller should be the guy they should trade, but is he really tradable? Because of and like all these moves would be better made last summer. No, that's the real issue here. Like the fact they let this go on, because trying to trade, players with big salaries in the middle of the season, particularly in a time when everybody's capped out, I think, is really was short-sighted. They should have done this, last summer, because it's not like they didn't know it was coming.
Yeah. So, obviously with us leading up to the trade deadline, we'll be following what's going to happen with the Canucks. So we don't, it just seems right now, and just sort of shifting slightly here, it just seems right now we're in a limbo state when it comes to Cav, I get the impression based on what I was hearing, like from Elliot Friedman or reading articles from Pierre LeBrun or anything out there regarding trades and the trade deadline. It's not going to happen until probably the week leading up to March the 3rd, because everything is so tight, and they're just, the teams that do have the cap space, they're probably not anxious to make moves. It just seems it's going to be in limbo until like March the 1st.
Yeah, and maybe usually you see a bunch of little deals, but I wonder if this year we might just see, just the name players that teams want to try to make, and then not a lot of little trades, because everyone is so capped out, and you're not going to go through that gymnastics to add, a number 7 defenseman. So right. I think we may see, that Horvat is going to move, and maybe Patrick Kane and a few others, but I don't think we're going to see 35 trades. I just don't see that can get done.
The one thing I'll say about Tocchet's 5 weeks is a lot of it's on the players now. Like now, even if you had a good season, you got a new coach. If you don't fit in his system, you may not fit there long term. So that's the tough part. Is now everybody has to kind of go through a tryout, and they're going to see. But the problem is that they're not going to say that they're rebuilding, and with the new coach there, so he's not allowed to. He's not afforded the time that a lot of other coaches are to sort of see what he likes, see what he doesn't like. He almost has just 5 weeks, because then things could change drastically for him. And in the offseason, it's not like they could sign a lot of players. So it's a tough job. I would not want the job.
Yeah, and based on what Rutherford said, and I'll believe it when I see it, because he's always been a guy who's been out front in any organization. He sort of made reference to the point that, I think I'll take a step back here, and it's going to be Patrick.
Next guy out. The minute the season's over, I fully expect us to see something either just before the draft or just after the draft. How Jim Rutherford is, either taking some other position that takes up less of his time, or he's just retiring.
Yeah, I mean, he is 71 or 72. Yeah. So
but there's always been talk that he's like Lou. You'll have to carry him out of the draft, or carry him out of the press box or whatever. I've long heard that he always wanted to be in Toronto, and but right now, Russ, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, that seat is taken.
For now,
and we'll talk about that in a minute. So tonight, Johnny Gaudreau returns to Calgary as the Columbus Blue Jackets play the Flames. Just, okay, he got paid. We know the reasons why he, left Calgary and went to the States, closer to home in New Jersey. It's tough to read the inner mind of a player is, but Russ, do you think he regrets going to Columbus because right now, I mean, they're an organization that seems aimless. They have a couple good players. They just don't seem to have any kind of great direction. And we thought they were going to be a little better than they were, a lot better than they are right now.
Yeah, I don't think he regrets it. I mean, we saw a quote. At least Daryl Sutter had something nice to say about Johnny Gaudreau that he'd like to have him. But I think Gaudreau had gotten to the point where he really valued being closer to his family, however that was going to happen.
Right.
And I do feel like that and more money made more sense to him than riding this out in Calgary. And maybe he saw the writing on the wall, like, hey, it wasn't going to get any better than last year, and they didn't do anything last year. Right. So, in the playoffs. So, I don't think he regrets it.
Yeah, and I think the fans there were kind of hard on him, to be honest with you.
Oh, definitely last year they were.
Well, and even prior to that, I think
when he was worse, I guess.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't think he regrets it either. And to be honest, I'm really curious to see what the fan base will do. He's even said that he expects to be booed, but I'm less sure of that. I mean, that maybe they'll appreciate the kind of player that he was now that he's gone.
Yeah,
so
we'll see. Outside the playoffs, so the fans could look at this and say, "Well, if we had Boudreau, we'd probably be better," which is probably true.
Well, the response they gave to Matthew Tkachuk is probably an indicator of what they're going to do with Gaudreau. They gave him a standing ovation. They did a video tribute, and they gave him a fine ovation. And then every time he touched the puck after that, they booed him. So right. I think they'll show respect, and then they'll show the respect that a good player gets in terms of somebody who, in their mind, turned on their organization. And they'll it's sort of like Russ. The worst was the Tavares treatment by the Islanders.
Worse than recent memory, for sure.
Yeah, because if you're gonna boo the guy when he touches the puck, fine. But he was your captain. He was your best player for, I think it was 9 years. And when they did the video presentation, it was scurrilous. They destroyed him. It was bitter, and then they booed him. So they showed him little or no respect. And the reason I bring that up is because the Islanders are playing in Toronto tonight, and obviously that reaction won't be in the stands at Scotiabank Arena. But when they play later in the year on Long Island, it still lingers. At least Calgary will pay respect to the guy who had been there for a number of years. But then they'll do what fans do, and they'll boo. So,
maybe I think Chuck and Gaudreau are two different kinds of. I think they'll elicit different responses, but we'll see. I mean, you can't always predict what fans will do. So
yeah, I'll be checking in to see what happens.
Either way, we could almost draw a conclusion, not quite yet, but soon, that losing two players with 100 points is bad.
Yes,
bad for a team.
Yeah,
there's a bulletin. Losing 200 point players is bad,
and only getting one back.
Right.
Now, Russ made reference to Daryl Sutter, and another story over the weekend was Daryl Sutter's treatment of rookie Jacob Peltier, who played. I think he played less than 8 minutes in his NHL debut. And let's just say Daryl Sutter.
Disrespectful. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. You're a hard-nosed veteran coach. You're gruff. You grumble, all that stuff. Fine. If that's your personality, fine. I don't think John Tortorella would have done that to a player. I don't think I don't think Mike Babcock would have done that to a player.
Totally disrespectful.
Oh my God.
It's really appalling. And he thinks he's, I don't know, being, what we would say is cute or clever or, the whole video that I watched of that was just appalling. Let's try to keep, have some civility in our game, in the treatment of human beings. Like, that was ridiculous. So.
Yeah, it's sad.
In case you didn't know, he ended up pretending he didn't know who that was. What was his number?
Yeah. Okay. So, you put the guy in the lineup. I think you know who he is.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
did Eddie Johnston do the same thing to him when Daryl Sutter broke in with the Blackhawks? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Was that his original coach?
79-80, yeah.
Or did Orville Tessier or whoever the coach was for the Blackhawks in the early?
No,
I mean, I know that Eddie Johnston was. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
later on, Orville Tessier.
But did he say that about him after his first game? No. I mean, it's and of course today they reported that he said he had a good game. It's like it's such contrived baloney to push that to the media today to try and cover up for yesterday. This is the problem I do think with Daryl Sutter in this game, in this era. There definitely was a time for Daryl Sutter in the NHL. But again, he likes to just do whatever he wants, however he wants, everybody be damned. And if he's not making the playoffs, all of a sudden having that guy as coach isn't as charming.
Welcome. Yeah, well, and it's all about circumstances. Like,
yes.
Have we seen, like, if when a rookie comes in and has like a 4-point game or something, and someone asks him, and the coach goes, "Who are we talking about?" You know what I mean? Right. And then it's funny,
right.
So I don't know if Daryl Sutter thought he was being funny or what he thought, but he certainly, I thought, was dismissive and disrespectful to a new player. And if he was trying to be funny, he wasn't.
So. Welcome to Jurassic Park. That's
yeah.
Now, okay, the Bruins continue. I mean, this is unbelievable. I mean, okay, first of all, it personally makes me look like an idiot because I thought that, and a lot of people thought they were on the decline. We didn't expect, all the injuries, Krejci coming back, Nick Foligno after a bad first year, like the goaltending was a question mark, McAvoy, like all these things. Everything has fallen into place. They're getting great goaltending. Their defensive scheme is great. They've got the perfection line, and they've got a second line with Krejci and a third line with Coyle and Taylor Hall. I mean, Russ, 37, 5, and 4. They're on pace for 66 wins. I believe that's more than the 70. Was it 77 Canadians?
Yeah, they're on a record pace for sure.
Yeah, I mean, nobody would have predicted this. Nobody. I thought there'd be some bounce back in them this year. Last year, I didn't pick them for the playoffs. They made it. This year, I picked them. They'll make it. But I didn't think they were going to be the best team in hockey. I just figured what they brought back, they'd have one more surge. Now, who the heck knows? Maybe, like Kevin said, they're going to have 2 or 3 more surges because some of these players are really legendary players that, again, are really able to manage on the ice. I think that's an important thing. It makes a coach's job a lot easier when you've got these guys that just know how to do it on the ice and could handle the younger players. That makes everybody's job so much easier. And then, you figure out the Allmark situation. And when I dug into it, last year he was busy getting his family settled into the area, and he wasn't totally comfortable there. And now this year he is. And so he's having the best year of his career. Like, a lot of things are hitting right there, and it's going to be very hard to beat this team.
And this really speaks to the idea that we usually put our arms around every time there's a coaching change, and we start talking about a new voice. And I think in this situation, when you've got a lot of veteran players who had grown weary of the former voice, who's now in Vegas. But, Montgomery has come in. He's got a little different approach. It's just a different guy. And it matters. It creates kind of a new level of excitement, re-energize the team, to have someone new, someone different. Everybody's now, their places in the lineup are not exactly the same. So, it's just kind of a new beginning. And I think all of that has kind of played into it. But I think just seeing the impact of Jim Montgomery is just a reminder of why, general managers like to change coaches every once in a while, just to have a new voice to change things up and re-energize a lineup.
Yeah, everything is so loose and confident. They're all confident with Montgomery, and they never would have been that way with another season of Cassidy. And again, Cassidy's doing his own fine coaching job. So it's clearly like he can't, not that he can't coach. It is just what Kevin said. It is just the voice factor.
Yeah. But although Vegas has hit a wall now, so
they have.
Yeah.
And there have been reports coming out regarding Pasternak and his new contract that they might get it done before the summer. That obviously he's having an unbelievable year, and I'd be stunned if he doesn't get, if he doesn't break 8 figures, isn't over 10 million. If he is, if it isn't,
I didn't I read Kevin Dupont predict $100 million or something like that.
That's 12.5 a year.
Yeah, I believe Kevin Dupont, who for those of you who don't know, has been around forever and knows what's going on. I think he was talking about 12 million.
I don't know if he's getting that high, but we'll see. Maybe
if he does, God bless. That'll buy you lots of Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Okay, in the Connor Bedard update, and this is sort of quasi. You see teams that have injured players who could be back decide that, okay, we're gonna do season-ending surgeries because, and first one I'm referencing is Cole Caulfield, because Cole Caulfield was playing pretty well up to like the game before he has season-ending shoulder surgery. It was nagging. It was, he was playing in pain. But Montreal was not going anywhere. I think they had 41 points. Of course, they beat Toronto on Saturday, which we'll talk about in a minute. And Slavkovsky, 3 months. Now he's probably out for the rest of the year. Now this morning, Pierre Dorian reports Josh Norris, who had come back from an injury. There was a slight re-injury. Now he's having season-ending shoulder surgery. The teams, Kev. Now I'm not saying that you're having surgery, for no reason. These players are hurt, but a lot of times these players play through pain. And if they're in the playoff race, they try to stay in. But there is motivation this year based on the rainbow to get these guys, get them out of the lineup and get as bad as you possibly can.
Yeah, I'm not buying that. I buy maybe that if you don't think you're in the playoffs, you might do it. But players don't care who you're drafting, and ultimately it's their decision what's going on. And I just talked to a general manager yesterday who said that he is talking with the Ottawa Senators about trying to get some help for them to push for the playoffs. So I don't know about the Canadians, but I can tell you the Senators still think they have a shot, to get in. But, I don't think there's any question that people are excited about the Bedard, the possibility. I just wrote yesterday about the Detroit Red Wings because the fan base is well aware. I mean, there is something worse than not making the playoffs, and that would be not making the playoffs and then being in the no man's land between the 11th worst record and being out. That's worse.
I talked about that on a Flyer show this morning. I'm like, you don't want to be in that spot.
No, you do not. That's no man's land. So, if you're going to miss the playoffs, you want to get in the Bedard sweepstakes. You want to at least have a chance. You want a lottery ticket. You can't win if you don't buy a ticket.
Right.
And Kev, I'm not disputing what the general manager told you because I'm sure that's true. But Pierre Dorian, the weird thing going on in Ottawa here is, they have 43 points. They're 11 points out of the wild card spot.
Yeah.
Okay. Pierre Dorian might be doing this because they're selling the team and they want to generate interest because he wants to keep his job. I don't know whether it's the best thing for the organization.
Yeah.
You're in a position right now where you can improve your odds to draft Fantilli or Carlson or Bedard. I would think you would try to do that. But if you have other motivations like, getting the building built in LeBreton Flats or keeping your job, then you're gonna go with that rather than go with what's best for the team.
No, I mean, and I think that's a fair assessment because he's not automatic. He's not going with the team. As you say in real estate, he doesn't convey necessarily. So I mean, he is thinking about that. This is what I really think. Ottawa is totally a long shot, but they'll probably hang in there and at least talk to people until they know for sure. They get closer and you got to make that decision. So, the biggest problem in that Eastern race, and I talk about that even with the Red Wings, there's just too many teams.
Yes.
Too many teams like that. Buffalo has crawled back into it. There's, Florida is playing better. The Red Wings are there right on the outside edge. So there is all those factors to consider. But I also think in the terms of this trade that he was talking about, they're trying to get some help for the future as well as the now. So they're not going to get any rentals. Like, I don't think rentals.
They're in a position, right? They're like Winnipeg. We need to get guys with term because we can't get guys to sign free agent.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And they also want some, they're still trying to build as they go along. So, that makes some sense. But it is interesting about Cole Caulfield because, he was doing that. So, but, at some point the pain becomes too much, or you start to say to yourself, why am I doing this? Because, we're not going anywhere. And the other thing too is you get this done now, you're really going to be ready next year. As opposed to, you wait till the end of the season and then you got to train all summer, and it's, even then you're not sure. So, I think it makes sense for a player like him to get it done now. And
well, that's what happened. And, Nick Robertson, who's a Leafs prospect, he had a dislocated shoulder that occurred in, I think, late November or early December, and they just did the season-ending surgery. At a certain point, you can't rehabilitate it. You can't build up enough strength in the shoulder, and you have to have the surgery, and it's a 6-month recovery. So, in 6 months, that'll be July, so he can have 2 months to train before training camp. So it does make sense. And, we know Caulfield is, Russ has attested to the fact that he's the most valuable commodity that the Canadians have right now. He's a sniper along the lines of Alex DeBrincat. So you want that guy to be healthy going into next season. Now,
it's fun though, and Russ is better to comment on this than me, but I think it's fun that the NHL draft has moved closer to the way that the NFL treats its draft. Like, it's midseason and you're now starting to see mock drafts, And I think some of that is just the way we're headed, but I think Ballard being part of it all.
Yeah, I think that's the main reason.
Go to sportsology.com to see Russ's mock draft.
Yeah, not a mock draft. I won't do a mock.
Oh, no, so his top 32. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, because the mock is hard. You don't really know what teams are going to be in the playoffs right now. You're guessing.
It is. But fans love them. Fans love mock drafts.
I know. It's a lot of guessing right now, but a lot of it has to do with the top 3 or 4. That's really the reason, especially if your team's not great. You'd like to just see who you have a chance at. Still doesn't mean your team's going to take that player.
Yeah. It's all I can do to do not write instead of, I don't use the Ballard sweepstakes, but I would like to use the Ballard, Fantelli, Carlson - sweepstakes. Like, I think, because there's as much. I mean, there's not as much interest. That's wrong. But there's a lot of interest in the other players as well. So
sure. Oh no, there's a ton. Mike, something to mention, because I know at some point you were going to mention the Leafs just for one factor, but playing the Islanders, who are close to bottoming out right this moment, they're bringing up Samuel Bolduc because Cal Clutterbuck's on the IR, which could be a blessing for them, honestly, to just to get more speed into their lineup. But Bolduc is a big defenseman who has toughness, has some offense in his game. He could help them a little bit, but they really need like a forward who could score. It would be nice if that's what was in their system that they could bring up, because they're falling behind.
Well, here's the issue with the Islanders right now. Palmieri is out. Clutterbuck is out. Dobson might miss tonight's game. They called up Ratu. Right now, and Wallstrom is out too. So, they're getting hit with injuries, and we know, because we've talked about them ad nauseum, they can't score. No. And if they, and right now, they're at 51 points. They're 3 points behind Pittsburgh. So they're not they're not out of range. Pittsburgh's got a couple games in hand, but you can just go so far with great goaltending and a solid defensive concept. Paul in the chat saying Palmieri and Pelech are back tonight. So okay,
yeah, Palmieri missed a lot of games. He's only played 21 games. Like that's a failure in and of itself. That whole signing has been a failure, and it's hurt them because that's allocated. That's another one of those $5 million allocated players that they needed to get offense from, and Lou fell on somebody who he had from the past, and clearly was not going to be good in the present. And so, that hurts him. Pelech back is a great thing too, but it's not all that's going to do is cut down on the differential. Yeah. They're still losing close games, even with Sorokin playing great. That's the big problem for the Islanders.
Now, Thomas is saying in the chat, and I don't know if this is true, that Wahlstrom is likely done for the year. If that's the case, then they're in deeper trouble because he's one of the guys who could score. Switching to the Leafs here, first I wanted to mention this, and Kev, I don't know if you caught it. The CBC ran a 2-hour documentary on Harold Ballard called Offsides. It was Gord Stellick, the former Leafs general manager, was one of the executive producers. Russ, I'm sorry, from 902. Oh, Jason Priestley directed it and narrated it. And being somebody who has observed the Leafs through my brother, who's a big Leaf fan, going back to the early to mid 70s when I was a kid, none of this stuff was surprising. But just looking at it through the prism of hockey in 2023, some of the stuff that Harold Ballard said about women in the media, about African Americans, about the most politically incorrect person I've ever. I mean, it was so bad. It was so bad, and I was like shocked. I mean, I remember it, but I didn't remember it being as bad as it was looking through the way hockey is now and the way society is now.
Well, for sure. I mean, it was just a different world back then, and it was not a world of kindness. That was it was a tough. The sporting world was tough. But just think how we were as kids.
This is how. Okay, Harold Ballard gets control of the Leafs in the early 70s from Stafford Smythe, who dies unexpectedly. He was being tried, and he ended up going to jail for a year and a half. He makes a ton of money promoting stuff at Maple Leaf Gardens, like concerts and things of this nature. A lot of his revenue came from selling programs at Maple Leaf Gardens. The league in mid 70s, 77, 78, said and the reason he didn't put the nameplates on the back of players' uniforms was because it sold programs. If you don't know the numbers, people are going to buy a program. The league says you've got to put the names on the back of jerseys. So what does Harold Ballard do? He puts the nameplate the same color as the jersey. So the nameplate's on there, but it's in blue and you can't read it. I mean, stuff like that.
I remember Michael Jello in 1977 complaining that the Leafs haven't won in a decade.
Yeah, I was 10-year-old Mike Jello. No, but okay, let's switching to the Leafs, Russ, because I know that you were trying to get my goat.
I wasn't trying to get. See, this is what you're. No, I was not trying to get your goat on this.
Yes,
this is a legit conversation that needs to be had.
Okay, make your case.
This is a legit conversation. So, as I had
even
pointed out,
if you got his goat, he's deep at goat.
But Kevin, I had pointed out to Mike, and Mike luckily was able to find one instance of this. But 99.9% of the time in all team sports, you don't want to have a lame duck GM with his contract being up at the end of the season. Teams go very much out of their way to make sure that GMs are not on the last year of their contract ever. Why? Because it could be distracting for a team, and it definitely gets a lot of questions asked from the media. And so now we've hit a little bit more than the halfway mark, and I'm noticing those articles are starting to pop up in the Toronto market. Is Kyle Dubas going to stay here? What do they need to do to have him stay here? But I also said to Mike, they never did offer him a contract, and they didn't say they weren't going to give him a contract. But who's to say he's going to want the contract at the end of the day? Mike is just assuming, well, if they go to the second round, he'll want that contract. Human nature tells me that maybe he doesn't even want to be the Leafs GM anymore. Maybe he wants to do something else. Maybe that's why he hasn't signed his contract. There's always that chance.
That's where we part here, Russ. Because up to a point. Okay, I'm sorry. There are 4 or 5 jobs in the NHL that most managers would kill for. The Toronto Maple Leafs general manager's job is one of them. Not because it's the greatest job, but because if you ever do win there, and Brian Burke said it back in 2008, if you ever win there, they're going to be erecting statues and whatever, naming streets after you. Right now, MLS&E is holding Kyle Dubas' feet to the fire. He had a long-term contract when he got the job in 2019, I believe it was 2018. He had a long-term contract. It's the last year of his deal. They haven't gotten out of the first round. Now, a lot of people believe he's done a great job. He's done a better job than Dave Nonis. He's done a better job than Brian Burke. He's done a better job than Lou Lamoriello, and he's done a better job drafting than Mark Hunter. If you ask me, if I had a vote, which I don't, I'm a reporter, but I think he's earned an extension. But MLS&E is hearing their fan base say, we haven't won a round since 2004, and they're saying, okay, even Dubas said at the beginning of the year, he said, I want to be based on my accomplishments, my full accomplishments over my tenure. Well, one of those accomplishments or lack thereof is advancing in the playoffs. They're spending a lot of money on not only players, but on management and scouting and whatever. And I think he's done a great job, but part of the job here, Russ, is to advance. Now, if he does, I don't think he's going to say, I'm going to go and start my own analytics think tank, or I'm going to go manage the LA or the San Jose Sharks or something.
Maybe he'll buy a junior hockey team.
Maybe he'll buy the Sioux Greyhounds. I don't think he's got that kind of money, but whatever. But I'm saying, like, if they accomplish something and they offer him a contract, he's taking the contract. I see no reason why he wouldn't.
Yeah, I'm with you. You start thinking about the great jobs in sports, or the high visibility, coach of the Green Bay Packers, right, goaltender for the Montreal Canadiens. I would put Toronto Maple Leafs general manager up there as well.
It's also one of the most demanding.
So sure. It is, but I don't see him leaving that job either. If it's an option, but yes, the fact that he's sitting here without a contract. And the opposite is also true as well. Like, if it was open, they'd have a lot of great candidates.
Sure. If they lose in the first round, he won't be fired. They just won't renew his contract. So, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, well, thank you, Kyle, for your service, and we're going to go a different direction because we haven't won. We haven't won in 7 straight first rounds or 7 straight opening rounds. And, I don't think MLS&E would be looked upon as being unreasonable by that because, you have arguably one of the better cores in this league with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and John Tavares. And is it a failure of management? Is it a failure of coaching? Is it a little of both? I think it's a little of both.
But he added extra pressure to the players that really like him, knowing that if they don't do this, he's not going to get a contract. That adds to it.
Yeah, but I don't know. Affinity for a general manager, you don't normally hear that. You know what I mean? Like,
Mike has talked about how he's close to Matthews and a few of the other players.
Yeah, if that's the case, I did not know that. But
yeah, I do think it will be easier for the Leafs to re-sign Austin Matthews with Kyle Dubas as general manager than it would be with an unknown general manager, just because there's the unknown there. Dubas has been in the organization since Matthews was drafted. I don't know how close they are. I'm not having coffee with them or something like that, but I have heard that, there is a relationship there. And, the Leafs treat their players very well. So, could some other general manager accomplish the goal of signing Matthews to an 8-year extension? Sure. If they pay him the most money, which I think he's going to end up making, then yeah. But it'll be, let's just say, if the Leafs lose in the first round, and they're playing, they're probably more than likely playing Tampa. We don't know if they'll have home ice advantage or not, but I don't think that means anything to Tampa Bay. It does, it's going to be a 7-game series, and if Game 7's in Toronto, it won't matter to Tampa Bay, and probably it'd be more pressure on Toronto if it is, but whatever. The result of that, if they win that series, then I think Kyle Dubas is back as the general manager of the Leafs for the next 4 or 5 years.
But the other thing is they've also set it up that if they do lose, first question it's going to be asked is it's going to be about Dubas, not about any of the players.
Well, I mean, because
the minute they see Shanahan, they're going to be like, "What are you doing about Kyle Dubas?" And of course, they're all ready. They're going to be like, "Well, we're going to talk about it and have meetings." And Kyle Dubas may not even want to hear what they have to say.
Well, they won't ask about the players because the general manager is going to be the one who's deciding on what to do with the players. So the first question is, who's the general manager? The second question is, who's the coach? Because if you fire Kyle Dubas, you're probably firing Sheldon Keefe too. So, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.